all, Joshua Steger here from ETFadviser.com.au, and today I'll do another weekly update, just basically what I've covered in my weekly subscription email. So you can see it's pretty comprehensive. Got our key ideas for the week ahead, and just reviewing basically pretty much all of the 380 ETFs in Australia and what's moving, what isn't, and where the opportunities lie for investors going forward. So let's just review some markets and give you an idea of what we're seeing in ETF space in Australia and basically global markets as well. So here we've got the ASX 200, so you can see V-shaped rally from the lows, and now we're approaching those previous highs. We'll see what happens here. I mean, it's been a pretty significant rally, and certainly expect, there's 20% in 2 months, so certainly expect some further volatility here. So just be a little bit cautious. We did get a bit of selling in the small caps to close the week on Friday. So, if I had a crystal ball, I'd probably be looking for a bit of work here before things can move either way again. Certainly, a strong rally like that, needs to be digested. So that's where we're at the moment. Let's just have a look at those resources. This is financials, sorry. Start with financials. So obviously, they've been really strong, all-time highs. Driven by CBA. There's not a whole lot that international investors can buy with liquidity in Australia. So, a lot of money's gone into CBA and the financials. So, yeah, I mean, that looks pretty hot. I mean, what's the catalyst to keep pushing it from here? That's the big question. So, therefore, I'd be a little bit cautious in the next couple of weeks. I kind of expect a bit of volatility to pick up. The other big factor in our market is resources. So, this is just an example, the QRE ETF, and you can see pretty much still in a downtrend. There was the tariff flows had a bounce back, but look, just in this big base, there's nothing, you can't really push out with BHP and Rio where they are and the iron ore price where it is. Obviously, gold has helped this index, but we don't have much else running at the moment. Copper tried to go. We had silver move out, but we don't have many large silver stocks. And so it's a bit of a no-go there for the resources still for the Aussie market. We'll have a look at the Aussie dollar versus the US dollar. So obviously this is important because a lot of the ETFs in Australia are unhedged. So if we have a look on the weekly chart down here, you can kind of see there was that pullback into the start of 2025. There's your tariff correction, and it's kind of been in this bit of a range here. It's hard to tell how it's going to move out of here. I mean, the Aussie dollar, we're going to have further rate cuts. The US dollar is not great. So just have a look at the DXY. So this is basically a currency basket of the US dollar compared to other currencies around the world. And clearly that's been weak, but the Aussie dollar's probably been weaker. So at the moment, there's no trend change there at to be worried about, but certainly if the Aussie dollar starts to strengthen, you really need to think about your hedging and what position. So, for example, there's a FANG ETF, which gives you exposure to the Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google style tech companies in the US. So you can buy one that's unhedged, you can buy one that's hedged. So just think about that, down the track if we do start to see the Aussie dollar firm up. But at the moment, not an issue. NASDAQ, obviously this is a pretty important big market, similar type of action that we've seen in the Aussie market. So they're approaching highs. It's kind of just creeping up. So we've had a bit of, there was obviously still the tariff news, a bit of black swan, plus Elon Musk and Trump's kind of spat at the moment. So there's 35% in 2 months. As I said, a bit like the Aussie market, probably expect a bit more chop. It could touch marginal new highs, and then we'll see what happens. I think we've got to be a little bit cautious there, given the amount, the size of this V-shaped rally and how quickly it's occurred. Typically you need to work off that excess. So we'll see how that plays out, and that obviously has impact for pretty much all the diversified ETFs, the pre-built ETFs, and obviously Aussies have big exposures in Aussie ETFs and anything exposed in the US. So for us, in terms of what we're looking at in terms of our subscriber email, we're still looking at those thematic ideas, and there's some good thematic names out there. So we'll cover a few of those, but I think that's where you're going to get a lot of value this year, even though, despite what's happening in the bigger indexes. So here's the S&P 500, very similar kind of action. It's starting to do that chop around previous highs. So we'll see how that all plays out. As I said, next couple of weeks, I think, going to be pretty choppy. Russell, so this is the small caps in the US. We had a bit of a bounce on Friday, but you can see this is pretty junky. It's really nowhere near, the previous highs on the weekly are way back here. And then, you pretty much on the daily, it's got a lot of work to do to get up here. So that's not really telling us a whole lot. And still pretty weak. I mean, look at that bounce. It's not that significant. 25% compared to, say, the NASDAQ, which has done 35. Have a quick look at Bitcoin as well. So Bitcoin, I think it's going to be a really interesting asset for the rest of the year. So we saw this really nice base, and this is where we started to watch it. It did break out to new highs, and now it's settled back in. It's held this 50-day, and it's still quite tight here. So it kind of felt like, is that a false breakout, and then settle back in, probably at that point where you're close to getting stopped out, just to save your capital, but looks to be setting up again. So this is certainly on the watch list for the next couple of weeks. I mean, the base is very constructive. Volume's kind of died off here, and we'll see if it can start to push out of here back into new highs. I mean, it's definitely back on the list. So Bitcoin, one to watch, and we'll be watching that really closely for our subscribers. So in terms of the best trending ETFs at the moment, obviously you've got your defense names. So this is just one of them, ARMR. There was probably the primary base, and it's just kind of just trended out. Incredible, really. And just in terms of that performance for this year, there you've got 37%. In the year alone, and it's we're only just halfway through, or just starting June actually. So pretty incredible performance. So that's just shows you what those thematic ETFs can do, and why we're so excited about them for subscribers. And here's another one that's been a bit more recent. Obviously, been a big performer. So this is your video game and esports ETF. So just one example is game. And you can see this was the primary base back here. And from there, on the weekly, it's done... it's up around almost 90% now. But this was your secondary kind of buy point there, where you had the tariff correction. You could just see how strong it was out of there, form that little handle, and now it's just creeping out. So this is in trend. Looks really strong, particularly some of the names in the US that make up this ETF. So, tariffs don't really affect video games and esports. So that's a pretty exciting name, and one that we're able to get onto for subscribers. We've been talking about this last few weeks. So India, really interesting. Obviously, it's going to be this week, is kind of expecting some tariff and US trade deal news. So we'll see how that plays out. But it's been very strong. Needs a catalyst to push it out. But, I mean, that looks really good. And anytime you've got a market that's growing GDP, or a country that's growing GDP at 6% this year, 6% next year, 6% the year after, and it's setting up like this out of a really constructive base, you've got to have it on your watch list. So that's a pretty exciting name, or exciting sector. And we've got a few ways that we want to play that for subscribers. Also, just look at this is kind of the nifty. So this is the India mid caps, and this has probably been a little bit stronger just in terms of the move on Friday. Moved out quite nicely. That's probably towards the highs of that base, but really constructive, tight here. This week is could well be the week with these trade deals. So we're watching India. We've got our names for our subscribers, and we're well prepared for what we want to trade this week. Also cover China. China also has a trade meeting on Monday, I believe, in London with the US. So that could be a market mover. So in terms of playing China, this is the A50 domestic index. yeah, it's pretty junky. It's not really giving us anything. Where the action is for China is Hong Kong, and obviously you've got listed Chinese stocks. You've also got more broader Asia tech stocks there as well. So this is the Hong Kong index. Might just zoom out here on the weekly. Actually looks really constructive. So if we just draw that back, I mean, there's your nice base. It's just kind of doing that work out of here. Might need a little bit more time, but that's, as a weekly base, that's really constructive. So that's obviously tariff correction, bounce back up. Now it's just working out. So we'll see if this week is that catalyst that can push this market out as well. But certainly Hong Kong is the way to play China at the moment, and we've got our ideas there. I mean, obviously we've also got, so in terms of ideas, we've got IZZ here, which looks really interesting. So this is like a China stocks, but also what's kind of listed in Hong Kong, because as I said, that China A50 is just not giving us anything. So this is looks a bit like Hong Kong, but a lot needs to do a bit more work to get up to these highs. Whereas here we've got Asia probably looking a bit better. And just in terms of, I'll just change that. So just in terms of this base, I mean, a bit deep, but you can see it's kind of doing the work here. Will this week be the catalyst where it can push out with that trade news? We'll find out, but that's certainly something we'll be watching really closely. Another kind of thematic name that looks really good, kind of V-shaped though, but has been working it off the last couple of weeks, is Hack. So this is like ETF, an ETF on cybersecurity. So this looks really good. I mean, look, if that starts trending out of here, once again, I think cybersecurity is a key area going forward. So that looks pretty exciting. So that's one we've got on the watch list for our subscribers, and we know how we'll be playing that and at what points. And this one's also really interesting. So agribusiness might be back. Food is one way to play it in Australia. But you can see the long kind of downtrend, but it looks like it's bottoming out. So this looks really constructive here. There's your tariff correction. It's bounced back up pretty quickly, and now it's forming this nice kind of handle. So there's your base. If that starts to push out, I mean, it can really start trending. Obviously, it's more a bottoming name, but if that really starts moving, that could get going, and it's a sector, certainly for the future that we need to, I think we need to be on top of, and it's kind of underperformed the last few years, but could really get going. Here's one in the US, same kind of stocks, not exactly the same, but it's got the same chart. Probably looks a bit better on the weekly. It's popped up already. But there you've got, it's got that same little handle that's formed here. So we'll see if that can start to push. Obviously, themes run globally, and at the same time, things don't run individually. So, that's another kind of, as I said, these aren't holding exactly the same underlying shares. So it's interesting to see that one setting up as well. Energy, another big play, but it's not oil. This is more so in the uranium space, but this is probably the way to play it in terms of ETFs, because a bit broader. It's actually got not just uranium miners, because I think that's not the way to play this theme, but it's also the people who are building those nuclear plants and providing equipment and that type of thing. So this looks really constructive. The underlying stocks look constructive. I mean, it's had a big run, but it seems to be back in as a key thematic. So there's 65% from the lows, but it's now forming this handle, and sometimes these themes can just go. So we've got to be conscious of that. Ideal if it takes a bit more time, but if it gets going, I mean, we've got a plan for subscribers, and I think it's certainly worth watching. But energy is going to be really key going forward. We know with AI and robotics going forward, it's going to be huge. Here we've got another idea we spoke about in that energy space. We spoke about this last week. CLNE, it's a bottoming name. It's just been a really terrible performer. I think it's off around 50%, pretty much since it listed. But now, here we've got a nice bottoming structure, and I've had a look at some of the underlying stocks in this name. Actually, I've got a few here that actually looking quite good as well. So that's definitely a bottoming base. If you can start to push out of here, as I said, that could be the bottom, and that could really start trending. So another, we've got Atom and we've got CLNE in that energy space. So this is more the clean energy, but it doesn't matter where it comes from. There's going to be huge demand for energy. So here's a couple of names in that clean energy ETF. So this is Next Tracker. This, since the IPO, it's kind of been quite choppy, you can see. But now this will be on the weekly. If you can start to move out of here, this is kind of a big base there. I mean, obviously it's quite deep, but just looking here now on the daily, that looks really constructive, and it's popped up on earnings, and then it's sold back and held that 20 days. So it's trying to get out of here. That looks really constructive, and that's a big holding in CLNE. Here we've got Vestas Wind System. So this is more in Europe. But it's got the similar type of structure. So obviously, it hasn't done well for a while, but it's got that bottoming structure. There's earnings, and then needs a bit more work to do compared to NXT, but that's certainly a bottom. So there's, a bottom setting up. It's got to get through here before it can really get going. But interesting that the underlying stocks also reflect the ETF. And here's First Solar in the US, so another big holding. Similar story, really poor performer. And now, forming that kind of base, has more work to do, but probably needs a few more contractions. But, once again, having a look at the underlying names can tell you a lot about, the ETF and the theme that you want to play. So that's pretty much a summary of what we've seen this week. As I said, we've got a plan for subscribers. We're covering these thematic ETFs, and I think that's where, the money will be made in the next couple of months. I think the big cap, the ASX 200, S&P, NASDAQ, even the Eurozone, I think given the size of these rallies we've seen, they're just going to need a bit more time to work off. You might see marginal new highs here, but I think it's, as an index, that's going to, in terms of trying to play that, I think the money's been made there. I think thematic ETFs are going to be the way to go. So obviously Bitcoin, we're watching India and China this week, and also hack and food and Atom and CLNE. So they're the top kind of ideas that we saw this week, and I hope that gives you a bit more of a feel for what we're doing for clients and where the value can be added in the ETF space from Australia.